Another installment of Crowdfunder's weekly webinar. If you've joined us before, you'll notice that there is no Jess in the room. The lovely Jess is actually off doing a TED Talk in Bristol, but don't worry, because we have Mark here, who's going to be the co-presenter today. Mark is from one of Crowdfunder's sister companies called Energyshare, so we're going to put a slight energy slant onto today's webinar. Mark, could you introduce yourself and Energyshare?
Yeah. So, as I said, I'm Mark, and Energyshare are linked to Crowdfunder, but we have a wholly energy focus, and we're designed and set up to try and help people connect with energy. That's in different forms, to think about where they get their energy from and how they use it, but also, and the focus of today is about how to generate your own energy. And we do a lot of work with community groups across the country and try and unlock funding for them. The biggest one recently we did was Marks and Spencer's Energy Fund, which some of you may have seen and even taken part in. So the idea is to try today to see how you could use crowdfunding to unlock your energy ambitions.
Awesome. So, following the same format as normal, we're going to take you through a few slides on who Crowdfunder are, what it is that we do, how crowdfunding works, and we'll give you some good nuggets of information on how to run a successful project. If you're not in the energy space, don't worry, there's still going to be some good information, but a lot of the information that you do get will be angled towards the community energy and the energy industry as a whole. So, in just 2 seconds, you should see a presentation pop up on your screen. Okay, here we go. So, sort of already done the introduction, Crowdfunder and Energyshare. Mark's given you a little bit of an overview about Energyshare. If I just talk to you a little bit about Crowdfunder. So Crowdfunder is the UK's #1 crowdfunding platform. We have run thousands of projects, helped thousands of people raise literally millions of pounds. There's well over 1,000 projects that are live every single day. Hundreds of them get added every day. We raise projects, or we work with people to raise money from £50 all the way up to 250,000. Some go as big as 1.5 million. Across our total network, there are millions and millions of people who have been part of a crowdfunding journey with us. Specifically, there are 250,000 crowdfunders that we have worked with, and that continues to grow all the time. So, what is crowdfunding? Screen there are 4 types of crowdfunding. I'm going to whip through them fairly quickly and focus on the ones which Mark and I are going to talk to you about in more detail today. So the first, on the left-hand side, is equity. Equity crowdfunding is very similar to Dragon's Den, and it's where, in return for a pledge of cash, you give that back a percentage of your business equity. Second is lending, also known as peer-to-peer crowdfunding. That is very similar to going to the bank for a loan, and in return for someone giving you some cash, you give that back a interest repayment. The third one I'm going to skip to the end is community shares. That is sort of a mix between rewards and equity, where a community attempts to purchase an asset of some sort of value, for instance, the local pub or a wind turbine for that community. In return for a supporter giving you cash, in this scenario, you give them a stake in whatever the asset is that's being purchased. So it's very similar to equity in that sense. However, with a community share, a lot of people go into buying a portion of that asset knowing that they may never actually receive any sort of financial return. And the fourth one, which is the main focus of today, is rewards-based crowdfunding. That's what Crowdfunder specializes in, although we can help you run a community share, and we also have partners that can fast track you into equity and lending crowdfunding. So in rewards-based crowdfunding, in return for a pledge of cash, you give that back at something that's non-financial. It falls into 4 main categories. The first is you could give them a product. Second is it could be some sort of service. We've just been told that you actually can't see the slides, so I've been talking through And this is what happens when Jess isn't here. So if you give us 2 seconds, we'll see if we can get these slides up. Okay, well, while we're trying to get the slides up, I will just continue what I was saying about rewards-based crowdfunding. So in return for somebody giving you some cash, you give that person a non-financial, what is called a reward. That could be a product. You could give them some sort of service, if that's something that you have to offer. It could be an acknowledgement, so as simple as a thank you, or it could be some sort of experience, which would usually fall under the events category. Do we have a screen?
So we're just trying to get into full screen. Sorry about this, everyone. I think I can see them, that's the name.
Okay, so they're the 4 types of crowdfunding. We're going to talk more in detail about community shares and rewards-based crowdfunding, specifically rewards-based crowdfunding. Mark, how do those 2 sort of fit into the energy space?
So they're becoming more and more important, particularly with the recent announcements of the changes in government subsidies, community shares. We're seeing more people come to us to run community shares for their energy projects, and it has a really nice fit to it. There's a lot of information required for that and a lot of things that you need to be aware of. So it's something we're going to look to cover in a few weeks' time in a specific community shares webinar. However, rewards are absolutely perfect for the early stages of renewable project development. So trying to get things like a planning application, a way of funding a share offer, or the install itself. So it's really useful. And I think as we go through today, we'll see how specific examples sort of work and some of the projects we've worked with before.
Cool. So if we dive into rewards-based crowdfunding, which is what Crowdfunder specializes in, the easiest way really to explain it, if it's not something that you've really come across before, is with an example. I'm hoping we can show you the example, but I'll walk you through it while we're trying to do that. There's a chap called Phil. Phil lives in Leeds, and a couple of years ago, he decided that he really wanted to launch a bakery. So he went to the bank and he needed approximately 8 grand to start up the bakery. Most of it was going towards the all-important bread oven. The bank looked at him and said, "You've got no experience in making bread. It's a very risky loan for us to give you. So we're not going to give you the loan. We're really sorry." That wasn't good enough for Phil, because Phil knew that he had people who would want the bread within his local community should he have the means to bake it. So he turned to crowdfunding. He came onto Crowdfunder, created a project, and pushed it out to all of his friends, all of his family, and said, "If you give me X amount of money, I will give you the future sale of my bread." For instance, he gave 1 loaf of bread per week for a whole year to anyone who pledged £100 on his project. Phil did really well, so he pushed it out. It reached 114 different people who all decided to back his project. He raised the £8,000 that he needed. Hopefully you can see the slides now, and this is all making a lot more sense. So he raised £8,600. He bought the bread oven and now is working in his own bakery up in Leeds, having a brilliant time doing exactly what it is that he wants to do. What's really interesting, if you can see that there's 5 steps to how he's done it. The 6th step, which isn't on there, is he later went back to the bank and said, "I've now got a startup bakery. I've raised £8,000 from 114 different people who have all bought my bread before I've even had the means to make it, because they believe that it's going to be very good. and will you give me a loan now? And the bank said, yeah, of course. And they gave him £10,000, which was put towards the growth of the bakery. So that's a really interesting project. We really liked the story. It was one of our first ones, and it remains to be a core example. And hopefully that gives you a bit of a better idea on what crowdfunding actually is and how you might use rewards-based crowdfunding. So why would you use rewards-based crowdfunding? The obvious one is the money. Primarily, people will come to crowdfunding because they need to raise X amount of cash. But there's a few other reasons why you might crowdfund, or there's a few other benefits to crowdfunding that you might get alongside raising the cash that you need. So the first one is marketing. It's really difficult to fund a project successfully if nobody has seen it. So it's up to you to push your project out and shout about your project and tell everyone you know about your project. And in that vein comes a lot of great marketing for whatever it is that you want to do. For instance, pushing it out on Facebook, using Twitter, and getting people to retweet your idea. The press really like crowdfunding because it's fairly new and innovative, and the press run lots of stories, so it's great for engaging with local communities. The marketing that you get alongside running a crowdfunding project is a really powerful reason to run a project in the first place. Another reason why you might do it, or another benefit, is idea validation. This is becoming more and more important with all of the cuts that are happening at the moment, which leads into match funding pots of money being available. So if you were to run a crowdfunding project and you get X amount of backers who have helped you raise a number of a sum of money, and you take it to a match funder and say, look, we've got this, the people have proven that they will use it should we create it, then it makes it much easier for that funding body to say, actually, yeah, okay, we'll match that with 50 grand or 25 grand or 100 grand or whatever that might be. The third and final one outside of the funding is the advocates. It's a very strong way to engage with your local community and build a group of core people. Some people might call it a tribe, some people call it early adopters, but really it's just an engaged group of people around your idea and around your project. And they're really useful moving forward to help with further funding applications or to become part of the team later down the line.
This is particularly important and relevant for energy projects on a number of fronts, particularly when it comes to the funding aspect. What crowdfunding enables you to do is take ownership of the process. You're not having to fill in lots of grant applications. You're not waiting on other people's timelines. You can raise the money at a time and in a place that suits you. So you can very much schedule it along the way your project develops, i.e. funding a planning application, a survey, helping to raise other avenues of support, for example, through planning and things, so you can show the community support your idea. It gives you a chance to raise awareness of it. Many community groups suffer from perhaps there's misinterpretation of what's trying to be achieved or a lack of information that's available. This is particularly relevant. Think of a project that I've worked with quite recently, who the owners of the project were often accused of doing it for themselves, when the main aim they were trying to achieve was actually to build a community-based swimming pool, and they were going to use any funding and revenue from the renewable installation to build that pool. And they actually, through a crowdfunding approach, were able to get that messaging across. And as Si said, it really gives the opportunity to build the advocates up and to show that the community want the idea. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we move into the next section. So the obvious thing to talk about next is just very simply how crowdfunding works. And it's a simple 3-step process. So create your project on Crowdfunder. So that, as I said, can be any aspect. It could be the whole project through the installation, or it could just be part of your project that you want to raise funds for. Share the idea with your crowd. So that's your friends, your family, their friends, their family, and get them to pledge cash for the rewards you offer. We'll talk about the types of rewards you might think about later, but the idea is that someone gets something in return. So you're not asking people to just give you money, although some people will. And then by doing that and getting the messaging out, that enables you to get your idea funded and you to go into the next phase of development for your project.
Okay, so we'll get into the core sort of how that actually works and how to do it successfully. I thought it'd be really useful to show you what a project actually looks like on Crowdfunder. So in front of you now, you should see a project page. On that page, there will be three main things. The first is a video, which you can see right at the top there. Second is a written description. So if you were to scroll down, you'd see that written description. And the third is a set of rewards. They're sort of the three key things that make up a crowdfunding project. And there's some of the things that we're going to walk you through how to optimize in a second. Just thought it'd be useful to show you how that's actually laid out and what that looks like on Crowdfunder. So there's 6 key steps. They're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That doesn't mean that number 1 is more important than number 6, and it doesn't mean that you have to go step 1, then step 2, then step 3. If you can do all 6 of these different steps, then you will increase your likelihood of success tenfold. We're going to go over just some of the basics, some of the activities that you can do that will really add some value to your project. The idea being we want to make sure that any effort you put into crowdfunding goes as far as it possibly can. So if we jump into the first step, which is build a team. So the obvious reason why you'd want to build a team is because of the skills that that team might bring to the table. For lots of people, it can be quite difficult to make a video or use social media. So finding people who you can bring into that team and to help you out on those core skill bases will help make sure that you make the most out of the crowdfunding project. This is
Particularly relevant again for a community project because it enables you to build up your volunteer base, but also to maximize the skills. Many people have lots of hidden skills that you can perhaps call upon, and as you'll see with the sort of types of roles we've identified here, they're all going to be really important in terms of gathering information and evidence for things like planning permission, for community engagement, and it's the same skill set. So you can call upon your existing volunteers, but also it's a really good opportunity to bring in some new people and new ideas into your team.
Okay, so there's one other reason why building a team is really important, and it's less obvious than just building skills within your team, and that is the number of people who will pledge on your project at minute 0 of launch. So to give you an example, if I was to run a project, I know that I can probably get 10 people to back it straight away. Not because they like the project or even are particularly interested in the project, but just because they like me. So I'm talking mum, dad, gran, auntie, some of my best friends. I know that I can send them a message and they will back my project straight away. So if I was to run a project on my own, minute 0 on launch, I've already got myself 10 backers. If you have a team that is 5 people strong, and all of those 5 people can get 10 people to pledge on your project, which I think is fairly achievable, then on minute 0 of launching your project, you already have 50 backers. If those 50 backers pledge the average amount, which is 50 quid, then you're talking about launching with £2,500 on your project before anyone else has ever seen it, which gets you off to a really, really good start. So that's something to think about. And using the best friends and family to help jumpstart your project. So once you've got a team of people who can help you, you need to figure out the best way to approach telling everyone else what it is that you're trying to do. We call it your story, and there's 2 ways that you can do that through a crowdfunding project. The first is a written description, and the second is a video. So we're going to do the video second because it's a little bit more exciting. In the written description, which sits on your crowdfunding page, there are 3 key things that you need to get across. They are what you want to achieve, who you are and what you do, and how you're going to use the funding.
What's important to think about is who's your audience. Now, all of us involved in community energy obviously do it for a number of reasons, and environment will be key to that. But remember, most of the population won't be as excited by tons of carbon saved as perhaps you are. So try and get your message, because remember, you want these people to back your project, so they want to know the wider benefits and what it means for them and the local area. So yes, the environmental message should be in there, but it shouldn't necessarily be point one. So going back to the example I mentioned earlier with the community pool, that should have been point one. Everyone would have backed it. The tons of carbon saved by the project or the money that was coming into the local economy were important, but people were going to be far more engaged by a pool that they could use through the summer months. So it's important to think about that when you're doing your story.
Okay, and when you come to putting a written description together as part of the story, just as Mark said, it's important to make sure that you are providing the information that the general population, the people who will be quite engaged, want to see. Once you've got that information, it's important that you lay it out in a manageable fashion. I don't know about you, but if I come across a website which has a huge block of text, I generally won't read it, because that's quite scary. I know that's going to take me a really long amount of time. And often I'm only looking for a specific piece of information. The same thing goes for a crowdfunding project. If you put a huge block of text up, there's very little chance that everyone is going to read it, or potentially anyone is going to read it. So when you come to relaying that information on the project page, make sure you split it into paragraphs. You use subtitles and headings. If you can, put images in there to break it up and make it very manageable for anyone who wants that extra bit of information to find it quickly, learn about what it is that they want to learn about, and then importantly, go ahead and pledge. So, second way of putting across a story is with a video. We've got a video to show you. I'm really hoping that you can see the slides, which will mean that you can watch the video. Video is really important. It's your opportunity to give a really great first impression. Almost everyone who comes onto a crowdfunding project as a backer will click play as the first thing they do. So if you don't have one, then you're forcing people to read, which generally means they're going to be spending more time on the project. And as a generalization, again, the more time someone spends on a web page, the more likely they are to get distracted. In fact, if you have a video, you're 50% more likely to hit your target than if you don't. So what does a good video look like? It's short and sweet. 2 minutes is ample time. In that video, you need to tell people exactly the same information that's in the written description, and that is who you are, what it is that you're trying to achieve, and where the money's going. To do that, try and get someone in front of the camera. It's really useful to know as a backer that there's real people behind the project, and it helps me as a backer create more of an emotional connection with you and the project, knowing that there's people who are really passionate about this, as I might be as a potential backer. And the third thing is make sure you're prepared for it. Don't try and wing it. You want it to come across as professional as you possibly can. The more effort you put into the video gives a message that you'll put similar amounts of effort into actually creating the project once you've raised the money on Crowdfunder. So we've got an example. Mark.
Yeah, so this is an example from a project quite local to the Energyshare and Crowdfunder offices called Nuki Orchard. It does everything size outlined, it's simple to the point, it's got the people in there. And it was about presenting a dream and an ambition, and it comes across really well in a very short time. So I think the best thing, rather than me to talk about it, is to show it to you. If technology allows, we'll do that now. Okay, so should now be able to
there we go.
Sustainability. It's a word you've heard countless times. It's a word shrouded in misinterpretation. A word weighed down by doomsday predictions and consequences, some of which threaten to become a reality. But what does it actually mean? The truth is, it means different things to different people. But I'm going to tell you what it means to us. We think sustainability is simple. It's about all of us. It's about enhancing habitats for native species and working with nature, not against it. It's about using locally sourced materials and locally produced food that creates food footsteps and not food miles. It's about organic seasonal produce, not chemicals. It's about reducing waste, recycling, upcycling, and salvaging. It's about communities working together to improve their surroundings for the betterment of our health and well-being. It's about being conscious that what you're doing is going to have a lasting effect for the right reasons and not the wrong. It's about giving, not taking, and ending social injustice to create a fair world for all. We want to create a place that reflects that. A place for education, where people can come and learn new skills, watch wildlife flourish, grow, play, relax, and feel included. A place for apprenticeships, daycare, and community events. A rural escape in an urban setting. We are Niki Community Orchard. Come and build a sustainable community with us. We've got a growing team of passionate and dedicated individuals, but we need your help to make this a reality. So please visit our website and sign up and donate to our crowdfund, and let's bring something special to Niki and Cornwall.
Brilliant. So if we pull that back onto the slides, for me that covers all the bases. I know it's not particularly energy specific, however, it's short and sweet. It's quite powerful. There's lots of passion, lots of emotive language used in it. Luke gets in front of the camera. He's the project owner, and you really see that this is something that means a lot to him. For me, it tells me that he's someone who's dedicated to the project, and should he raise the money, which he did, he will put it to good use. And it's obviously been well prepared. There was no stuttering. It was all very clear, very structured. I know for a fact that they did things like storyboards and they wrote a script, and that's something that's very important when you are considering doing a video. So we now have a team of people. We've got an idea of what our project is, who we are, and how we're going to use the money. We've hopefully done a video, if that's at all possible. Now we need to figure out who it is who's actually going to support our project. There's a really easy way to do this. We call it a network map, but it could be called a number of different things. Basically, what we're doing is identifying different audiences that we could potentially reach out to, and segmenting those audiences to find out where the people who are most likely to support our project are. So in front of you, if you can see the screen, there are 3 different audience segments: existing customers, corporates, and local. When you come to draw your own network map, there will likely be many, many more audience segments than what you can see there. For instance, if I was running my own project, best friends and family, my first 10 backers would definitely be one of the spheres of people that I can reach out to. What we're trying to do here is figure out, if we were to launch a project, who's most interested in the project that we want to launch and who's most likely to pledge on it. So for many people in the energy industry, existing customers won't be a factor because you aren't set up as a business, but you might be members of associations or other community energy groups, and that would be a prime audience segment to identify before you go live.
Also, in terms of corporates, you may not have big sponsors, but there'll be lots of businesses you work with locally, perhaps a local installer who may be able to go out to their networks as well. So it's engaging the wider audience.
Okay, so we know we have a project page which is looking good. It's got a story on it. We've got a team, got a video. We know who it is who we can put the project in front of, in the hope that they will pledge on our project. Now we need to figure out what it is that we can offer them in return for their pledges of cash, which will incentivize them to pledge. So there's lots of different reward ideas out there. I think it's very important, if you want to run a project, to have a look at other successful projects on Crowdfunder and get a flavour for what other people have done and what other people have offered as rewards, and what looks to have been successful and what doesn't look to have been successful. There's a few examples on the screen in front of you. Rather than talk through individual ideas, I'm going to give you a quick overview. There's 3 things that you should consider. The first one is in the low end of reward values. We're talking sub 50, sub 75 pounds. You need to make sure that the reward represents good value for money. The key thing here is to engage with as many different people as possible and offer them something of great value. For instance, if you were to offer a t-shirt at £50, it's very unlikely that people will pledge on that. Not because they don't like your project or they're not feeling philanthropical, mainly because something inside of a person's head goes, t-shirt, 50 quid, that doesn't really make sense. I could buy a t-shirt for much less than that. If you were to offer the same t-shirt for £20, which is a much more manageable number for lots of people, you'll probably sell a lot more than what you would at £50, so it works out better for everyone. The second tip with rewards is in the higher end, so we're talking hundreds of pounds, potentially thousands of pounds. Try and build in exclusivity. Try and make the reward something that's not off the shelf, that you can't just pick up in the supermarket or when you do your online shopping. Make it something that if I was to pledge on that reward, it's something that I know my friends won't have done or won't have seen or won't have had the opportunity to do. And the third thing is make sure you have a really good range of rewards. By range, I'm talking monetary value and hitting as many different demographics as possible. So in the monetary range, we need to make sure we're starting our set of rewards at about £5. And the general rule is to go up to 10% of your target figure as a top reward. For instance, if you are trying to raise £5,000 and that's your financial target, you would start at £5 and run up to 500 as the top reward. How you space out the rewards in between that is up to you, but the obvious thing to go for would be reward 1 at £5, reward 2 at 10, 25, 50, 100, 250, 500 would be a sensible way of spacing out rewards and making sure that you have something in line with each of those values. The second way that I talk about range is hitting as many different demographics as possible. So once you've identified the audience segments that your potential crowd fits into, try and figure out what it is that would incentivize each of those groups to pledge and what's going to get them really excited to be part of your project. For instance, if you've identified a number of local businesses or corporates who you think would be interested in backing your project, make sure you have some sort of sponsorship or a reward on there that's relevant to those groups of people. Similarly, if you are going out to your local community, make sure you have something for them that they can get involved with, possibly an event, for instance. So that's sort of my top 3 tips on how to set out some rewards. I think specifically for the energy industry.
Yeah, it's about thinking outside the box a little bit. We know that most of the groups will not have a product necessarily. They may have a service that they could offer, but it's important as well that you don't take away the day-to-day income of your entity. So if you're a church hall or a sports club or whatever it may be, that you're not giving away the income that keeps you sustainable as an entity. But think about what you could do. So an event's great, an unveiling of the solar panels or the wind turbine, inviting people along to that and allowing people to cut the ribbon, having a supporters board. But also looking at your network. So who's in your group? A really good example, which links up to the sponsorship, that a project that we recently ran, was one of the people in their group had a holiday home, and as a £500 reward, they offered the holiday home for a weekend in the out season when it was quieter. But that pledge, so that reward sold really quickly and gave a good amount towards the project. And you can also do simple things like pick a nominal amount for a panel and allow someone to buy a solar panel on your project. And that's worked really well on other projects that we've run previously.
So once you've figured out what it is that's going to incentivize all of the different members of your audience segments to pledge on your project, we need to figure out how much we're going to raise and what sort of funding model we're going to use. There's two ways that you can raise money on Crowdfunder. One is under an all or nothing concept, and the other is a keep what you raise concept. Fairly self-explanatory. On all or nothing, you must hit whatever target you set yourself, or all the money gets returned to the backers. In keep what you raise, whatever money comes in is yours at the end of the project. I would recommend wholeheartedly doing all or nothing. If you are doing flexible funding where you keep what you raise, yes, it's much less risk, but on average, you'll raise 20% of what an all or nothing project will raise. So that's 5 times more on all or nothing. If you go down the all or nothing route, that means that setting your target is a very important activity, because obviously you don't want to put time and effort into trying to raise money that you have very little chance of actually raising against the target. There's a simple bit of math that you can do to figure out if a target is achievable. We know that the average pledge on Crowdfunder is about £50. So if you take your hypothetical target figure and divide it by £500, that will give you, on average, the number of backers that you need to achieve that sum of money. If you go back to your identify your crowd network map, excuse me, and you realize that you have only about 15 people in your crowd and you need 200 people on average to reach your target based on the math that you've just done, you know that it might not be the right time to run a project, and you need to figure out how to increase the size of your crowd first, or reduce the size of the project down to a much more manageable chunk and start off small when you can use crowdfunding to grow your community that way. The final thing to really consider in terms of setting up the project and decisions that you have to make on the project itself is how long should the project run. The default mode when you're launching a project is to go for as long as possible, because it does sort of make sense that the longer you're live for, the more chance you have to bring in funding. But actually that doesn't happen in reality. The screen in front of you shows a U-shaped curve. And what that is depicting is at the start of a project, when the project's very new and exciting and you reach out to everyone who's been waiting for ages to hear about your project and to come on and pledge about it, you'll get loads of pledges at the start. And at the end, when everyone goes, oh yeah, I remember I should have pledged on that project, you'll get lots of pledges and there'll be a flurry of activity at the end of the project. If, for instance, you run an 8-week project and you have 1 week at the start where it's all very exciting and 1 week at the end where you capture all the pledges that everybody had promised you over the duration of your project, then that can leave 6 weeks in the middle where the project is in a state of what we call plateau. It happens to every single project, absolutely everyone, where it's not quite new and interesting enough and not quite time pressured enough for people to pledge. And a 6-week plateau is a really, really long time. Plus, running a project for 8 weeks is a lot of work, and finding the right messaging to put out is really difficult over an 8-week time period. So if you're considering running your own project, don't go for, I'll keep it open for as long as I possibly can. Do a short, sweet, sharp project and you'll end up being much more successful. So we've got a project page. We know how long it's going to be live for. We know what the target is. We've got a good story. Hopefully we've got a video. We know who's going to pledge on it. And we've got rewards that are going to be of interest to them. Now we just need to get it in front of those people, those audience segments that we've already defined. Basically, what we're trying to do when we market a crowdfunding project is to use the people that we can reach out to share it into their own networks. And we use crowdfunding as a platform to amplify beyond the people that we already know. Because there are rewards on offer, and it's something that has to specifically be funded within a certain time frame, this actually works quite well, and lots of people will share your project for you. And in an ideal world, we'll get it out to the people that we know, they'll get out to the people that they know, and those people will hopefully share it with the people that they know, and very quickly you can get a project in front of hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people.
So then the next bit is obviously about getting it funded, which is the reason you've done all the hard work. And it breaks down into 3 phases. It's worth pointing out that we will send a pack out which summarises all the information that we're talking about today. But essentially there's a pre-launch phase, which is when you need to be picking up the phone, getting out the message to your network, securing the pledges from your team so that on day one you know you're not starting on zero, but also going and meeting the local businesses. And for a lot of people, that'll be where you can get rewards from, because it's a double-edged. It's reward for your project and it's marketing for their business. So if you're a community group and there's a local pub or hairdressers and all those sort of things, they're the people that you can also talk to rewards, to give rewards for your project. And it's also an opportunity to get feedback. So show people your video, ask them about the rewards, see if they think they would pledge on them. Are they value for money, as Si alluded to earlier? Then you've got a launch event. That have been projects that have raised a significant proportion or all their funding during a launch event. So it's a really great opportunity to get the messaging out and attract some PR and press. And then during the phase when your product is live, there's a lot of work that you will have planned beforehand in terms of online sharing, getting information on your website, engage with the local press, perhaps local radio as well, and making the most of that email database, getting the posters out in the local post office, etc. Make sure you get that message as far and wide as you can. But as with anything, the key is the planning that goes on beforehand. You don't want to, as much as possible, be reactive to this. You want to have a clear plan of what you're going to do when, and that way you can align time for this, because obviously a lot of community groups are made up of volunteers who have full-time jobs as well. So you need to make sure this is well planned.
So when you are live, Crowdfunder will give you a set of statistics and some information about how your project's going from a data point of view. This is quite important to help refine your project as you are moving forwards. For instance, one of the stats that you will get is number of backers against each reward. If you have one reward at £75, which is doing really well and lots of people are backing it, and one reward at £50 that nobody is backing, then you should remove the £50 reward and you should put another one in at £50 that's similar to the one that's selling at 75 to make sure that you capture as many pledges as possible. So when you're running your project, you have a dashboard, and that has a lot of different information and statistics which you can use to your advantage as you're moving forward. So that's our 6 steps to crowdfunding success. We first looked at the team, so gathering as many skills as you can, and also making sure that the team's engaged and providing at least 10 backers on day one for you.
Then it was about getting your story right. That's in terms of the video and your page, and making sure you're engaging the right demographic of people, so it's knowing your audience.
Number 3 is actually identifying that audience. So figuring out who it is that you can reach out to, grouping those people together and coming up with some sort of plan moving forwards on how you engage with them.
Then got your rewards, so that's about value for money. We've can see we've got quite a few questions coming in on rewards, so we'll spend a little bit more time talking about them in detail as we answer the questions. Then you've got to make sure you set your target accordingly. So the simple bit of math is to divide a hypothetical target by £50, which will give you the number of backers that you need to achieve that target, and move it up or down accordingly, and of course based on how much money you actually need to achieve your project goal. And then probably the most obvious, not necessarily the most important, as the prep work is going to be key, but shout about it. Get out to your friends, your family, ensure that they're getting out to their friends and family, because ultimately if people don't know that you're trying to raise the funds, you're not going to hit your target. So very briefly before we get on to questions, in terms of a step-by-step guide, it's get a team together. A lot of you will already have that if you're involved, particularly within community energy. It's usually there's a core group of volunteers that you can rely upon. Then it's make a plan. Nothing more important than that in terms of how are you going to approach this. Then create your project on Crowdfunder, get the messaging out, and get your idea funded. So they're the key steps. As I say, we will be sending out a pack with all sorts of information, and there's lots of help on the Crowdfunder website as you go through the process with tips and pointers. So I think we've now got a few questions coming in. So unfortunately, you're back to looking at us. Let's have a look at the first question that's come in. So this one is from Hayley, who says, crowdfunding is a great way to raise funds and awareness. But as it becomes more mainstream, do you think it will get less useful? Will people become less interested as more people use it? I.e., at the moment, 1 in 50 people use crowdfunding. As it becomes 1 in 3, for example, will people become bored or annoyed at being asked for money by crowdfunding?
That's probably one for me. No, I don't think so, is my answer. I think the more people that use it, the more people will talk about it, and the more mainstream it becomes, the more optimized we'll have an opportunity to create the industry. I don't know if you've come across Uber, but that's a very good example where at the start only a few people used it, and within that group of early adopters, which is what we can sort of call everyone who's taking part in this webinar, they were really engaged and they shouted a lot about it, and it was really very interesting. Now Uber has completely changed the whole taxi industry, and that's something that crowdfunding is doing in the alternative finance space.
Next question is from Whitney, which is for a community energy project, can you provide some examples of the types of rewards that you could provide to community share investors? I think there's 2 points there. One, community share is slightly different in the sense that often people will or potentially may get a financial reward, and as I say, we'll talk about that in a future event. But in terms of rewards for community projects, simple things like buying a solar panel or the theory of buying a solar panel, but it's important to engage your community. Can you go out to the local butcher, the local hairdresser, the local pub landlord? It acts as a double thing. It gets your message out there to them, they'll become advocates for you, but also it's marketing for their business. So everyone who views your page will see that these people are partners of yours. So yes, if you've got something that's simple that you can do, you could offer reduced rental for a certain occasion or things like that, but you don't want to take away your day-to-day income. So it's important you engage your network and see what services people have got. Someone sat close by to me offered lawn mowing services on one of their projects, but you know that might be something you can or can't do. I say it's important, think about what's on the website. There's no such thing as plagiarism in crowdfunding. Go and have a look and see what other rewards are out there. Anything you'd add to that side?
Yeah, one thing, so rewards will typically fall into one of 4 categories: product, service, acknowledgement, and experience. The product and service is very difficult potentially for you to do yourself. So as Mark said, engage with local businesses and people who might be able to offer that for you. The things that you can do and should be able to do are the acknowledgements and the experiences. So if you are creating or putting up a turbine, for instance, why not do some sort of walk around the local environment and get someone involved? Maybe you could have a survivalist theme or a how to pick the right berries, for instance, as you walk around, or learn about the local nature. Something like that you could sell tickets for £30 for. It brings all the community in together and it gets them really engaged with what you're doing and what the wind turbine is doing, as well as being really good fun.
Next question comes from Brooke, who says, we've already done various fundraising events in the community and not raised much. Why would people care about a crowdfunding project?
Hard to say, depending on what other fundraising activities you've been doing, but the primary reason why crowdfunding works really well is that you're offering rewards. So it's not just a, will you please give us £50, which does work to a certain extent. But we've found that when you put rewards into the mix, people will often pledge a lot more, and they'll be a lot more willing to share the project and tell their friends about the project, because it's not just a, can you help out my local community? It's a, this looks really good fun, why don't we go do this experience that's part of the rewards, pledge on it, and like we help the local community at the same time.
Okay, we've had another question from Jamie who says, we've been awarded some energy grant funding, but it isn't enough to cover the size of the project. Is it better to spend effort on crowdfunding instead of applying for grants? So I think probably I'll start with that, and then Sile, no doubt, have some other things to add. I think obviously great you've been successful, so it shows you've already got that validation. Crowdfunding actually gives you a way to magnify that funding, so you can actually add your existing grant funding onto your total, so you're not starting from zero, and you use crowdfunding as a way to top up and fill in that gap, going out to your existing network. Obviously, as Si mentioned earlier, there's a lot about momentum, so it shows if you're a long way towards your project, people will be engaged. That's not to say don't apply for grant funds, it's just something that you can perhaps do alongside. Grant funding is there, but obviously, as we all know, filling in grant applications, waiting for that yes or no, or the request for further information all takes time, whereas crowdfunding you can do at your own time and use your existing grant as a basis for the funds you need to raise.
Okay, there is something that I would add to that. I don't know a great deal about grant funding, that's not sort of my specialty, but I know that it's fairly single-sided, and that in that you are raising cash and you get the money, and that's pretty much it. When you're crowdfunding, you're raising the cash, but you're also making sure that everybody in your local area or everybody who's interested in your project knows about your project. So you get all of that great marketing and awareness. You also build up validation. So even though you don't need it necessarily for this round of funding, which you've already been given, next time you want to go for some sort of funding from a financial institution, you can say, look, previously we raised X amount of money from X number of backers in the local community because they really believe in the sort of thing that we do. And you're also going to build up that advocacy within your project. So you have that core community who are super engaged with what you're doing, and they're going to follow you all the way through. So the simple answer is yes, I would spend my efforts on it if getting awareness about your project, validating the idea, and building a bigger core community are important to you outside of just raising the money.
I often say, think of it a bit like the old sort of church hall roof totalizer. It's a way you can pull all your funding into one place. So if you do get additional grants coming in, you can add them into the mix. And it might be that by having a public space where your project is visible, that means that you can engage with other people, for example, installers. So often working with community group can be a really good case study for that. And we're finding local installers are actually willing to offer some in-kind services and support. Potentially, if you're lucky, they may even give a bit of a community-based discount as a way of using you as a case study. So there's that opportunity as well. So that looks like all the questions we've had in. So I think unless any others pop in the next few seconds, we'll probably just worth summarising some of the key points.
Yeah, okay. If you are watching and you have a question, then we will send you an email out with all of the information that you've seen during the presentation. On that email will be someone that you can reply to ask your question. If something, as soon as we turn the webcam off, goes, oh no, I wish I'd asked that. But in summary, I think Mark thinks that crowdfunding, rewards-based crowdfunding, is a area of real interest to the energy industry, and specifically for raising money for community energy projects. If you want to start a project, head over to Crowdfunder, talk to energyshare, get some ideas together, gather your thoughts, and remember those 6 steps, which is build a team, figure out what your story is and the information that's going to be relevant, look at who will potentially fund the project and try and break them into audience segments, try and figure out what rewards are going to incentivize those audience segments to pledge on your project, create a target figure and figure out what funding model you're going to go on, and then shout about it, market it, and get your project funded.
And I think a final point from me is that obviously with the changes in the feed-in tariff coming in January, things like loan finance are going to be less viable, if viable at all, for many community projects. And rewards actually gives you a way of raising some funds without having to necessarily pay back directly. Obviously, using the rewards gives you that opportunity to engage the local community and provide a service rather than having to give a financial incentive. Community shares will also be a possible tool in the sort of armory that you'll have in terms of how to raise finance for community energy projects, and that's something that we will be doing a webinar on in the future with some more specific examples of community shares. But I think what we've seen with rewards-based crowdfunding is that it allows people to do the different stages of a development. There's not much, if any, at-risk capital out there to do things like planning applications, funding for community shares, or any aspects like that. Rewards-based crowdfunding can really be useful for that. So we have had projects that have funded as little as £1,200 to pay for a planning application, through to people who've done 12,000 plus for an actual installation. So there's that real opportunity to get the funding when you need it, and to give back as a way to your community.
Brilliant. Okay, well, until next time, good luck, and we'll see you then.
Thank you very much.